Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. And be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video. I don't know if you have any information. What the feeling I got making some calls before the show today, seems like TJ Finley had the better week of the two, and I think TJ Finley's going to start the game on Saturday. We're going to see both of them. You obviously have seen these guys, scouted these guys. Give me a thought on the two young puppies.
Matt, early in the week, I really felt that the nod would go to Max because of his running skills. Max was not a runner in high school, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But you watch him practice, man, one of the things he can do, he can scoot, and he can run. And he can run better than Burrow could from a speed standpoint. He's got some wheels on him. Now, asking him, hey, listen, something's wrong here in the genetic pool, because I know your pop didn't run like this. And he laughed, and he's like, oh, no, it's my mom. His mom was a softball player. And he said, so I get the wheels from her. So early in the weekend, listening to Coach O talk about, both are sort of even. Both have had really good practices. Max is a real good run. And so I think he was sort of tipping the scales a little bit toward Max in throwing in that running part, because if it's close, wouldn't you rather have the better runner? Because they're going to see an 8 or 9 man front against South Carolina. I know if I'm playing against LSU, man, I'm stacking the line of scrimmage. I'm going to try to make him make a bad decision, throwing the football one way or another. But yesterday, his comment about during his show about, man, TJ has had the less amount of missed passes and drops. Sort of has me, okay. Early in the week it was Max. Now he's talking about TJ, and I agree with you totally. I think you'll see both. This sort of kind of popped in my head that this was, I think, 3 years ago at the Manning camp. Peyton was kind of shooting the breeze before the Thursday throw-in session for the college counselors. And he was telling me, and I remembered it, but then he kind of brought it more to light that, as a true freshman, he really began the season as the third-string quarterback. And so he said, I wasn't expecting I'm going to play. Jerry Colquitt was the starting quarterback that particular year. And Todd Helton, who goes on to have a really good, great baseball career, was the number 2 guy, and Peyton's 3. And he says, all of a sudden, Colquitt gets hurt. I think it's the first series. It might have been either the 7th or 8th play, something like that. And then Helton didn't do well. And all of a sudden, the freshman Peyton Manning gets thrown in there. And he said, I didn't do real well. He said, I thought I was prepared to play college football. And he said, I found out real quickly I wasn't. He said, a couple weeks later, guess who he's playing? Florida, which has been the pain in the Yatta Bay to Tennessee all that time period. And he said, I didn't have a really good game then, too. I think they got beat 30-0, something in that range. But he says, guess what? Todd Helton gets hurt in Game 4. I think it's Mississippi State, if my memory is right. He gets hurt against Mississippi State. Guess who gets put in? He said, I was the guy. So he said, at that point in time, I kind of thought I might have an opportunity to play, but now I'm the guy. Jerry's hurt, Todd's hurt. Now I'm the guy. And he said, we ended up that season, and he said, after struggling really bad early in the year, we ended up being 8-4. And he said, they played in the Gator Bowl. I think it's Virginia Tech that year. And he said, I really struggled early on with interceptions, but he said it almost I started to get into the groove. But he said, you know what? You got to make a choice. And he said, I give Coach Fulmer a lot of credit. Really, he had no choice at that point. Once Jerry Colquitt gets hurt and Helton gets hurt, he had really no choice but to play me. But I became the guy. And he said, the team accepted me that I was the guy. And he said, all these, sophomores and juniors and seniors who were playing was like, hey, Peyton, we don't care about how you do it. Figure out a way to win. And he said, that's what I'm going to talk to these young kids tonight. Going back, and he said, remembering that freshman year. But he said, I think about it, Matt, has anybody been more prepared to play as a true freshman than Peyton Manning? You think about that situation. Now, again, it's a different time, different situation, because, we are talking about this is 94 with Peyton. So things have evolved a little bit, with the 7-on-7 and being able to practice with your team and everything else. But I think about Peyton, and I asked him, I said, Peyton, just tell me the biggest thing you have to do. And he said, first things first, you got to figure out how to win and do your own thing. But he said, the second thing, and he said, I think it's almost as important as the first, is you got to be confident in what you're doing fits what the personnel around you can do best. He said, a lot of times, what I see freshman quarterback do is they come in there and they want to do like they did in high school. He said, you know what? A lot of times the high school talent around them was different, and you were maybe so much better than the other team. Like you said, you play in the SEC, that's a different story. Those other guys got big-time recruits too. So he said, you got to play to the strength of your personnel around you, but he said it's such a mental thing. He said, as much as anything else, it's not a physical issue, it's a mental thing of being able to process what to do, where to go, making that audible, making sure somebody can pick up that blitz when you see them in a blitz situation, kind of changing calls. Like he said, Coach Fulmer didn't like me to do it, but I did. Mm-hmm. I would change the play. But he said, I would tell him, I'm seeing this. And so I went to that particular deal, and he said, Coach was like, well, if that's what you see, that's what you got to do. So he said he sort of challenged me, and he said, I like that part. The two quarterback situation, which I think you will see with LSU, because both of them are different players. We've talked about this before. TJ is this huge pro-style drop-back quarterback. He's got a gun. He can put the ball in short window areas out on the field. And he's got a rifle. Now, he was heavier, but I think he saw that Max was making plays with his feet. He lost about 10 or 12 pounds. So it should help his mobility. But, again, you're still talking about a guy who is really more of a pro-style type quarterback. With Max, he's a southpaw. He's been through it sort of before, seeing, the situation with his dad and watching what's happened there, his uncle being Mark Ritt. So he grew up in that atmosphere of understanding the pressures of being the starting quarterback, even if it's for one game, and it may not be more than one. But it may actually be two when you take a look at it, that he understands the pressures of playing the position. He is more of a runner than TJ is. There's no question about it. And my old friend Joe Clark would love me to say this. He's a bolter at times. Just like, if you're out in the field with a horse and, and he's gently walking along and all of a sudden he spots you and you may make a movement he doesn't like, he takes off running the other way. He bolts out of there, man. I'm out of here. And, I think, with Max, one of the things with him is to watch. Max is not going to hesitate a second to pull it down and take off running with it. So you got to go through your progressions, but I think, your first instincts may be, hey, listen, I got a shot to make a play running the football downfield. And so they're two different style quarterbacks. They do things differently. And how well they can process the mental part of playing that position, not just from calling a play. Come on, people can call a play, but adjusting to what you're seeing. And Will Muschamp, that's his wheelhouse, to kind of show you something and then take it away late defensively. How well you adjust to that particular deal. So the fact that it's close and no one has sort of pulled ahead of the field early in the week, I would have bet a few coins that it's Max, only because I know what style player he is and the fact that he can run the ball, and Ed sort of talked about that quite a bit. But yesterday, during his weekly radio show, he came out and said, man, listen, we look back and how well TJ's throwing the football, and he's had less drops. He's been, less incompletions than any other quarterback. That is, is he tipping you off? And as I've said a lot of times, he tells you something before he tells you.
Yep.
And you heard it on his radio show last night. So, but either way, I think you will see both, and I think they'll have some packages built. If TJ's the starter, that Max will run, and I think vice versa. But somewhere along the line, late in that game, you got to give it to the guy you trust the most. You got to give it to the guy that you think can make it happen. And that's something Peyton brought out, that, I want the coach to have confidence that, hey, I might make a mistake, but I think I know what I'm doing out on the field. But like you said, freshmen make freshman mistakes for a reason.
Okay, Mike, let's talk some Saints-Panthers. Let's start, Mike, with, I guess, where we started a week ago with Michael Thomas. But a new issue has arisen with the hamstring. What are we expecting from Mike Thomas on Sunday?
Yeah, I brought it up last week. When he made his little comment about what, nobody knows the full story about what happens, and I've had a little setback. Now, he said that early last week. I think, what he didn't tell you is the hamstring injury, most likely that he's talking about having the little setback. Mm-hmm. And we all know one thing with a hamstring injury, that, man, the first time you pull it, you gotta get it back, because if you pull it the second time, you out for a long time, a long period of time with the hamstring injury. So I'd be surprised if he played against the Carolina Panthers. You coming off the ankle injury, now you got the hamstring that's popped up. So you worried about. You want to win against the Panthers, but you got a lot of season left to play. And so you may have to put him on the shelf for another week. But he sort of tipped everybody off, and I think everybody just sort of gauged it. He's just talking, because he got a whipping, so to speak. But I think what he was actually trying to tell you without telling you is, hey, listen, I got another injury. When he said I had a slight setback. That hamstring injury is something, especially for a receiver, a skilled player, cornerback, receiver, running back. That's a couple weeks. So we'll see with Mike Thomas. But I think, in that off week, one of the things Sean has always talked about is I want the players off their feet. I want them off their feet. I want them to get some rest, get away from the game a little bit. Like you said, now that doesn't apply to the coaches. So you got to come in, Jack. There ain't no time off.
Right.
And one of the things is trying to get better at things that you have not done real well. And to me, that would be in the coverage part of the game, the communication part in the secondary, where you see, man, at times they've really been miscombobulated, so to speak, in figuring out who's got who and who's got what. So now back-to-back weeks, you're going to play a team that has a quarterback with a high RPO value to it. Teddy does a lot of that. That's something Joe Brady has sort of incorporated more and more with the Panthers. And now, especially without McCaffrey, you're trying to get into it. That puts a lot of pressure on the linebackers. And Nick Foles does the exact same thing with the Bears. He does a lot of that RPO stuff. What it does with your linebackers, if you commit too fast to the run and jump up the field, all the quarterback does is take a step and a half back and throw it right over the top of your head, and you got a completion. You got a guy running free down the middle of the field. If you drop in coverage because they spread you out, 3 wide receivers, a flex tight end, you run in the football. There's a big lane once he gets past the line of scrimmage, and he's off and gone. So, man, the worst position in the world to play today is linebacker. I'm just telling you, Matt, with the responsibilities you have at the collegiate and professional level, I look at it on the defensive side of the football, there is no question that it's linebacker. Because with all this RPO stuff and you're trying to read it, these really good quarterbacks now can yank that ball out of the belly of that runner and throw it, and he throws it right over the top of you, and you're gone. How much does this team, talking about LSU, how much do they miss Patrick Queen, Jacob Phillips?
Ugh.
And so that goes to show you, and it's also happening in the pros too, that do a lot of this RPO stuff. They hide it a little bit differently, but they do a lot of the same sort of thing. So that's something, knowing you play in Teddy, knowing that they have a system that's based a lot off of what Sean did with the Saints, because Joe's admitted that he picked up a lot of that from Sean. When Sean hired Joe Brady, he hired him to bring in some concepts of the RPO system that they were running in college.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted some of that incorporated in the Saints offense. And so all I can say is Joe's job was not 9 to 5. Joe's job with the Saints was like 5 o'clock in the morning till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. No, Joe was breaking down a lot of film and showing different things happening. And, me and Hebert would give him the business, in practice sessions when we were able to go at that time. Hey, you're not going to get donuts, or you're not going to Popeye's Fried Chicken for Sean yet, and he would just sort of roll his eyes. Come on, guys, give me a break. But we knew, come on, we give him a break. We knew he was putting in a lot of hours. And so now this is the professor going up against the student, so to speak. And, man, listen, I do know one thing. Sean is really competitive in that phase of the game. And so it'll be interesting to see how they both kind of go off of one another. You look at their receiving core with DJ and also with Anderson. It's a lot of short stuff. Now, Robbie Anderson was known for his deep play ability, but I think he's averaging a little over 10 yards a catch. So it's going to show you they've adjusted to what Joe wants to do, sort of nickel and dime you, keep you on the field. And then, they run the football with Davis, who's, man, kind of shortcut runner, tough guy, been cut 3 or 4 different times. Man, he's hungry. I've always felt the weakness for the Panthers was their offensive line. They've got a lot of shuffling to do. They traded off Trey Turner in the offseason. And defensively, man, it's a whole new group. No Luke Kuechly in that lineup. That's a big chunk missing out of that defense when you don't have him. And then Kawan Short's not there.
Mm-hmm.
So you got some missing pieces. I've been impressed in what Matt's been able to do to keep this in line with no off season, and a young coach, a lot of changes offensively, defensively, a new scheme on the offensive side of the football, a lot of new faces on defense, and they've been competitive. But all I know is Drew Brees has had some of his best football games against the Panthers, and it's been with him throwing the football. And you got all these geniuses that tell you, I love zone coverage. Oh, yeah? When they played zone coverage against Drew, he riddled them. The times that the Panthers played zone coverage, and he sort of admitted, when I see that they in that zone coverage, I know where to go with the football. Because if that's all you're going to play, you got troubles. They're going to pick you apart. It's just the same way in college. You get the right quarterback, he's going to pick you apart, mix and match. They're doing a little bit more mixing and matching of coverage than I saw the last couple years. But just put it in the back of your mind, Drew has had some huge games against the Panthers, and it's been him throwing the football. And, without McCaffrey, man, it's tough sledding.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And I think eventually it catches up with you, not having that guy and so many new faces on the defensive side of the football.
Mike, one more quick note. We, on the Panthers, you and I talked before the season, and I think everyone roundly agreed they were in a full-on rebuild. The fact that they're sitting here at 3-3 sure surprises the heck out of me.
It's surprising.
How have they been able to do that?
This is just find a way to win. It's not been super impressive. You're not blowing teams out, but you're finding a way to win. And, man, I remember watching the end of that Falcons game, and clearly the Falcons had more talent than they did. But the Panthers didn't think the Falcons were tough. And what happened late in that game? They kept running it. And kept running it and kept running it. Every once in a while, I think Teddy threw one pass, but they ended the drive basically they ran the football like 99% of the time. It was their way of saying we a tougher team than you mentally and physically. And I think that Matt has sold them that. But hasn't he done that everywhere he's been?
Yeah.
Maybe we're not the most talented team, but we mentally and physically tough. And we're going to show you just how we are. And it might not be pretty, but we walk out with the W. For them to have 3 wins in 6 games has been impressive. Because I thought at best they could have 2. That they got 3 is a great job done by Matt Rule and Joe to get the very most out of that personnel. But eventually, Matt, I think it catches up with you in this league. I think it eventually starts to catch up with you that they don't have great talent on the defensive side of the football. And who knows Teddy Bridgewater better than what the Saints do?
True.
They know what he can do really well and what he can't do real well. So it cuts both sides because I've heard people, Joe Brady knows everything about Sean Payton. Well, guess what? Sean knows everything about what Joe knows, and he knows everything about what Teddy does good and what he doesn't do. So you're playing a team you're very familiar with, and I just go back to it that Drew has had some big games against the Panthers. He's done a really nice job there, and so they know how important it is to beat Carolina, and then you're going to play a really difficult game the next week against a very good defense because you understand how the Bears are winning. They're winning with special teams, they're winning small ball, and they're winning with their defensive front and making big plays in the secondary, getting turnovers. And you got Nick Foles now, and they believe in him. I think that team, hey, man, get Trubisky out of here. We got a guy that can win for us. He got a Super Bowl ring to show you. You know, he can take a team to the top. So the next 2 games, I think, will be very telling for the Saints because you're playing, an NFC South team and also playing a team that's been on a hot roll. And eventually you get hot, but eventually you cool off in this league too.
All right, Mike, so we started talking about the freshman quarterbacks. Let's talk about how this LSU-South Carolina game might play out. I want to flip it over because, look, Mike, as much as we're going to talk about quarterbacks, the reality is when you score 41 points, you should win a game. What makes us believe the defense is actually going to be any better in this time off?
Well, one way or another. One thing with South Carolina, they're not hiding what they're going to do. I mean, they're going to run the football with Kevin Harris. I mean, he's their bell cow guy at running back. Man, and again, he's sort of a shortcut, really squat base runner. And he keeps just banging away at you. And he's a really tough guy. He's got really good field vision. He knows how to kind of maneuver around the field to find an opening. And he's not super impressive with all these long runs, but he just keeps sort of grinding away at you. And that's what Will wants. I mean, that's what Muschamp wants. He targets Shea Smith quite a bit in the fact that he's got 22 catches, and I think the next guy on the roster with the most has got 9. So that does tell you he bird dogs Smith a lot. And you can tell Hill, when he goes back to pass, his first read is towards Smith. Almost predominantly, he'll look in that direction because he thinks he's going to get open. So they use that short, intermediate pass area quite a bit. That's been what we've seen from South Carolina, but it's all built around the running game with Kevin Harris, and it's had successful. Matt, if I'm a gambler, and I use that term, if I'm a gambler, this game looks too good to be true.
Right. This is the stinky line of the week, man. What's LSU doing favored by a touchdown?
Man, this is like, wait. And this I'll never forget. Working all those years with Buddy DiLiberto, he's like, Mike, I'm going to tell you something. If it looks too good, it's too good. You're going to lose. You're going to lose games like this. Okay. South Carolina has one of the biggest wins in the Muschamp time frame in beating Auburn. And that game was really no indication of really South Carolina kind of dominated play throughout the game. They had Nix on his heels the entire time, running around because you could see he was very uncomfortable in the pocket. I think the looks he was getting in the secondary, he was very uncomfortable with that, and so he would just take off running with it. So South Carolina, big game, man, you running high, you playing against a team that is giving up points and yardage. like a strainer, and now you got a freshman quarterback. And so you got a lot of gamblers that are saying, you know what, I'm waiting until Saturday to gamble. I want to see how that line closes. Because for whatever reason, I sort of believe that when you get pushed into the corner, always bet the team that has really got everything on the line. And LSU's got everything running or on the line this week. But it almost seem too good to be true?
Hell yeah, it does, Mike. But you know what? It's the same thing as last week with Texas A&M Mississippi State. That was a 5-point spread, Mike. I'm like, what? That was a stinky line of the week, but A&M covered it.
A&M covered it and covered it easy.
Yeah.
In that particular deal. But you can see now how teams have adjusted to what Leach brings to the table, and until he gets some more balance. And Costello, man, you talking about the comet shot. He got the comet shot of all time against LSU, and then that was it after that. Man, you can see how hesitant. And we talked about it in the pregame show with Charlie and Jordy. It's like, I watched him at Stanford. He's hesitant throwing the football. He's kind of got almost like a yo-yo delivery. Like he wants it back sometimes. Watch him throw the football now. It's almost like he's got the string and he wants to pull it back. Mm-hmm. He had that one game, almost like one hit wonder. Okay, if you're a band, you get the one hit wonder, and then after that, it all goes downhill. I'm interested in how Muschamp gets his team mentally ready to play. Man, you don't think you're overconfident if you're watching that game tape of LSU?
Oh, no.
And you just coming off of, a big win against Auburn? Matt, that's a real tough sell to your football team. Because, come on, you got to sell that to 19, 20-year-olds that, hey, this is the defending national champs. And they're looking at each other, defending national champs of what? Come on, that's not the same team I saw a year ago, especially on the defensive side of football. It's interesting. Man, they got a lot of plays in this, but it just, when it doesn't seem right, it's never quite right, so to speak. And so we'll see how well they do. For LSU, first things first, they got to stop the run, especially against South Carolina, because that's what Will wants to do. He wants to run the football with Harris because he's the guy. They feed off of what he does and then force Hill to make the throws. And one of the things in watching Alabama, Georgia, and this is kind of a pet peeve for me, but it's not taught a lot. What was so much different in the second half? And listen, Stetson Bennett, he's a great story. We all pull for underdogs in life because most of us are. We underdogs in life. You look at Stetson. If he's 6 foot tall, and I use the term if. Okay, he's trying to throw the ball, and he got really good receivers. But what did Alabama do in the second half they didn't do in the first half? They got their linemen to put their arms up in the air. And they had a few knockdown throws. They got distraction throws. They got a couple of pickoffs. For LSU linemen, they got to get their hands up in the air. If you can't make the play, throw your hands up there and distract the quarterback from seeing the target downfield. You watch games in college today, I guess it's a lost art of not teaching it. But we had Pete Jenkins on. Pete was like, man, the first thing I told Nick 2 weeks ago was, your linemen, they look like they got their hands stuck in their pockets looking for money. Tell them to put their arms up in the air. Put their arms up in the air. And so I think it's not only coverage and getting that straight, too. It's also making sure that quarterback does not have a clear vision downfield. And if you watch that Alabama game, one of the things they did really well was they got in the face of Bennett and forced him to make throws because the running game was sort of shaky. They weren't getting those big chunk plays. And so for LSU, they got to do a similar thing. But first things first, you got to stop the run. And secondly, when you get opportunities, you got to put sevens on the board. You're going to have a quarterback that's going to make some freshman mistakes. And when you get those opportunities, you got to get sevens and not settle for threes. I suspect this will be a very close football game, though, between the two teams. It just seems to be that's what's the makeup of these two football teams, that I think South Carolina is going to be a little bit down after a big high against Auburn. And how LSU responds to all of this. Man, you caught in the vortex of the tornado, since the start of the season. How well they react to adversity. It's a shared experience in life. The 2019 team had it. Now they're experiencing it as a team. And who jumps up as a leader or leaders on that football team? Because I think that it's not about coaching. It's not about people, assistant coaches and the head coach. It's about guys in that locker room that are refused to take this humiliation that you're going through. Because you know what? They're opening up every Sports Center or Fox News or whatever you're listening to. They're opening up that you're getting beat. So, that's humiliating to you because you're a competitor. And these guys are 4- and 5-star recruits. They've been the best of the best. And, there comes a time where you got to say, you know what? Stop blaming somebody else, and you got to go out and do it. And this is their moment to do it. And you may have to play a freshman quarterback. In talking to Dr. Elias about the injury to Miles, he made the comment Monday that he felt, would be at least a 2-week injury. So 2 weeks would be Saturday. But he said, it's a rare sports injury. You don't see that often in sports. You see it in a car wreck, where you get hit high, but then it messes up other parts of your body or different sort of events. Mm-hmm. But he said it could possibly be a 3-week injury on how well you respond. He said you'll know real early next week. If Miles is not practicing real early next week, then that's not a good sign that he'll get to play against Auburn. So you may have that rookie quarterback ready to roll for 2 weeks instead of 1. But, man, I just think LSU – I can't tell you why, but I think they respond this week to adversity. And it's their first real shared experience of everything really being bad. Everybody's down on you. Man, they dog cussing your coaches. They dog cussing you. You know what? You got to find some redemption somewhere. And to me, South Carolina is not going to blow you out. That's not what they do offensively in putting a lot of points on the board. But I could say that about Missouri, too. And it did that week. So I think first things first, play fundamental football, and I think you'll see some changes along the offensive, defensive line. I fully expect Cameron Warr will start along the offensive line, and I think you're going to see a lot more Joe Evans on the defensive line.
LSU hosting South Carolina. How do you see it?
I wouldn't bet it, but I'm going to go LSU 27-20.
All right.
I just have a feeling, and Matt, one of the things to watch during this game, Terrace Marshall Jr. going up against J.C. Horn.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about 2 first-round pick players here. And, man, J.C. is a bump-and-run cover corner. And I know one thing. That's got to open the eyes of Terrace. That if he's going to play me bump-and-run, and if he misses, man, I'm running right past him. And so it'll be interesting to watch the 2 guys go at it. And they let you get away with a lot more things in college than the pros. And JC, he's kind of a tuggy and pulley guy, almost like Seattle corners used to be years ago. But then they started throwing the laundry, and that ended that. But, man, that's a great matchup to watch.
Sunday, Saints-Panthers. What do you think, Mike?
I'm going to go Saints here 30-17 over Carolina. I just think the Saints are a better football team. They've played well against Carolina, and I know Sean wants this game bad. He's tired of hearing about this Joe Brady stuff.
Mike, we got a ton of questions. Let's start rolling. Mario Abear says, ask Mike, who starts at running back? Who gets the most total yards for LSU?
That's a good question. I wanted to talk about that. Somewhere along the line, you got to make a choice. Now, that might not be too happy with the 2 or 3 guy. I think it comes down between John Emery Jr. and Tyron Davis-Price. So you know what that means? Probably Chris Curry will be the guy. Okay. But the way I look at it, because that's just the way we don't see practice, so we don't see it.
Right.
But I think you got to make a choice here. And I think Emery and Price are sort of battling for that number 1 spot right now. And you got to make a decision to give that guy, your number 1, his chance, like you did with Clyde. You got to make that choice and give it to him, and then have the other guy ready to roll, give him a little bit of a break, but get him in the groove of the game. What LSU hasn't done well is run the ball. It don't matter who's been the running back. They got to run the football better. I like to see him give John his chance, but I think Davis-Price is right on his backside.
Okay. Kevin Monjour asked Mike, why is Marshawn Lattimore so inconsistent week to week? Is it physical or mental?
I think with corners, it's never the physical part. I think it's concentration. A lot of times the ball don't get thrown in his area, and you sort of drift, and then when it gets thrown in your area, sometimes you get beat. But a lot of times it is focus. I think that's a big part of playing the cornerback position today when you're at that level. That teams don't test you a lot. And then when they test you, a lot of times if you're not, fundamentally right, you get beat. All I know is if I see him on one side and Patrick Robinson on the other, guess where I'm throwing? I'm throwing on the other side of the field. So a lot of that playing corner today is not the physical part of playing it, but it's the mental part.
Less than a minute, Mike. Brent Simondo says, you think we see Micah Baskerville more this weekend?
I would hope so, because I think Mike has earned that right to play more. And your linebackers have done nothing to write home to mama about.
Right.
It's been inconsistent with Cox and Damone Clark. Man, he's been disappointing because I thought he would be the step-up guy at linebacker this year for LSU.
He's on Twitter at Mike Detillier, SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, Saints News Network over at SI.com with us every Thursday here on AFR. Mike D, you the man. Have a great weekend. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, Matthew.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.